Thank you. Boy, this is such a pleasure. This is my first public program that I've done in 2 years. It's amazing. And I'm really, really happy that it's with Patti, a person for whom I have great affection and respect. So I'm going to be looking at my phone. I'm not taking calls. My notes are on my phone. And we're going to chat for about 30 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. So don't worry. You'll have time to ask a million things that we didn't manage to cover. Okay, the subject. Jews and Mexico. Such an interesting and huge subject. So, Patti, why don't you remind us? Thank you so much. Oh, thank you very much. We're obviously a people who are in diaspora throughout the world. And I think for a lot of folks who don't live in a city like Los Angeles, which is basically Alta Mexico, they may be unaware that there even is a Jewish community or several Jewish communities in Mexico. And I'm sure many of you who are here today have links to those communities. But for those who don't, I would just love if Patti would talk a little bit about the waves of immigration of Jews to Mexico, because they are several and varied and span a very large time period.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Evan. And it is such a delight for me to be here with you on stage. I am a big fan of Evan's work. And we've known each other for a long time. But I think between the pandemic and the last time I saw you, it was just so good to see you today. I gave her a scary hug.
Not scary, not scary. A very welcome hug.
And we're so happy to be here at the Skirball. The team has been so energetic and thorough in putting this event together. So thank you to Marlene and her team. And we're so excited about the theme because I think people get very surprised when they hear about Mexican Jews. And I think even Mexican Jews in Mexico are surprised about being Jews in Mexico, because Mexico is such a Catholic country. You know, when I was growing up, I think 98% of the country described itself as Catholic. And by the time I was like in my early 20s, I think it was like 70%, because there were more Protestants and Pentecostals, but not more Jews. But Mexico is a very Catholic country, not in terms of how religious it is, but how Catholicism is a part of every fiber of its culture. If you think about Day of the Dead or Semana Santa or Christmas or Posadas, like Mexican Jews celebrate those things, not with the tree and the nacimiento for Christmas, but we eat all the food. And people think that Mexican Jews, when they hear about it, even when I first moved to the US, I knew that being Jewish in Mexico was not the common norm when I grew up, because my family wasn't a deep part of the Jewish community. My parents and my sisters, we were kind of on the fringes of it. We didn't go to Jewish school, we didn't go to the JCC, we didn't, But we did celebrate all the high holidays with my grandparents, who came into Mexico through the different Jewish immigration waves. But when I first moved to Dallas, when I married my husband over 20 years ago, when people found out that I was Mexican, they were surprised because I'm blue-eyed. And then I was like, there's a lot of blondes and red-hairs, and people don't know how diverse Mexico is. But then when they found out that I was Jewish, they just couldn't put it together. And I know I'm going in a different direction, but but so it's just to say that my journey into being a Mexican and a Jew has not been a steady one, and it's been an evolving one. And it's taken me all these years and moving to the US and recognizing and seeing from afar, and switching into cooking to study the waves of immigration into Mexico as a whole, the Africans, the Asians, and then seeing the migration of Jews into Mexico. It's kind of helped me understand how Jews fit into Mexico. But just to say that your initial question that I haven't responded was that Jews first made it to Mexico when the Spanish people made it to Mexico. So we're not a recent addition, and the evolution of Jewish Mexican cuisine is one that's been in the making for over 500 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that every time that people moved around the world, there were some Jews hanging around with those people who got taken or expulsed and found their way there. I mean, it's interesting for me because my own personal story, one of my grandfather's brothers, instead of coming to the US from Russia, went to Brazil, where, there's also a huge Jewish population in Brazil. So when did your parents come, or your grandparents?
Yes, no, but now I'm so curious about your Jewish family in Brazil.
Well, I think what's interesting to me is they've remained the most Jewish of any of our family. They've married the most within the Jewish community. And I understand, and yet when you meet them, they are totally Brazilian, which is hilarious.
That is, and what you're saying is something that I find to be so important with the Jews around the world. Because we've been running all over the world and we've been persecuted here or there, we felt we've had to leave this place or another, but we've grown deep roots in the places that have welcomed us. So my grandparents, the story of my family comes from two different migration waves. So, the first Jews that got to Mexico were with the Spanish. They typically came as conversos because it was a time when the Spanish expelled the Jews. This is like a short summary. The Spanish expelled the Jews in 14-something, and then if you didn't convert, you were burned at the stake, so either you converted or you left. A few left and came in those three boats, La Niña, La Pinta, La Santa Maria, and they made it to Mexico as conversos. So there were a few. But because there was a Spanish Inquisition in Mexico, the Jews who trickled into Mexico didn't show that they were Jews. They were doing that in secrecy. In fact, Diego Rivera, the husband of Frida Kahlo, who is one of Mexico's biggest, artists of all time, he loved to say that he was a marrano, which is another name for a converso, that he came from family of converted Jews. But then after that, after the 300 years of colonial rule, when Mexico shook its leash from Spain and became an independent nation, the liberals that took power in the 1860s thought with Juarez, let's invite those Jews from Europe because they're good for the economy and they will help us enact some economic and political reforms. And it was not until that invitation was matched with another need to leave that more Jews came to Mexico. So here's one of the waves of my family, the Polish Jews, who were fleeing pogroms in the late 1800s and early 1900s, which also was a wave that intersected with the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire, where more Jews came from there. But so my grandfather, who you'll see some photos of later, he came from a little town called Sojobole. And my grandmother came from a little town called Lesma. And there were tiny little peasant towns. They were farmers. And they didn't tell us much of their stories. They made it into Mexico. They married because they just found one Polish Jew with another Polish Jew. And they married, and they really found their home in Mexico and grew roots and found ways to make Mexico their home. And here's where I learned to make your home in a new country your home by cooking the food that you bring with the food that you found. My grandmother made the most amazing Veracruz-style gefilte fish. and matzo ball soup, you know, Mexican style with cilantro and jalapeno, and the tzimes with a little chipotle, and the chocolate babka with Mexican chocolate and Mexican vanilla. And we used to taco guacamole instead of chicharrones with grívenes. And all those things, which is, you know, so delicious. And when we ran out of the corn tortillas, we would eat that. You know, that was like a Jewish avocado toast. It was a challah. Now that I think about it, we should do that. You know, it's like challah, a slice of challah with guacamole. Sometimes she would mix guacamole with egg salad.
Oh, yum.
So imagine like an ego guacamole, and then top that with grívenes. We had that every Friday before dinner. And my Polish grandparents were very humble, didn't have much money, but Friday night, they just threw it out the window. It was a big meal, and they came from that wave, from Poland in the early 1900s, and made their life in Mexico. On my mother's side, it's a different immigration wave and a different kind of people. So my grandmother came from Austria. She came from a small city called Wolfsburg. And different than my Polish grandparents, who were peasants and, you know, were in farm, you know, my father, this was very funny because they didn't share many stories. And when I switched to cooking and people started asking me, wait, you're Mexican, but you're also a Jew, share about the food. And it used to upset me because very, very silly, because I used to say, why are they asking me about Mexican Jewish food as if taking away my Mexicanness? I am deeply Mexican. I'm a second generation Mexican, and I am Mexican. So don't ask me about Mexican Jewish food. I felt it, you know, I feel very differently now. I didn't feel so then. But so my Polish grandparents were from that wave, and then on my mother's side, my grandmother was from Wolfsburg. Oh my gosh, I'll tell you a really funny story now, remind me, about Austria. And my grandmother was fleeing the Second World War. When the Second World War started happening, the family got together. The rabbi from Vienna came to her family. It was the only Jewish family in Wolfsburg. And you know what's really sad?
That's crazy.
I just found out this story this year.
Wow.
I knew that my Austrian grandmother's family came from Wolfsburg. I knew that they had died during the war, but nobody talked about concentration camps or what had happened. And I'll tell you why I found out. But my grandmother was Austrian. In Wolfsburg, they owned a general store in Wolfsburg. And when the war started happening, a rabbi came and said, well, that's the story. The rabbi said, you guys need to go. This is not going to be hospitable to Jews. And so her parents didn't want to leave because they didn't believe it. And they said, you know, you are the oldest. She was 19. They said, here are our papers. These are the family's jewels. Go to America. She left on a boat to America where supposedly an uncle was living already in Brooklyn. And as she made her way to America, her parents were taken to Auschwitz and immediately killed. And her sister, her youngest sister, Annie, was taken to Bergen-Belsen. And she survived. Of course, she went through the horrors of concentration camps. She was stamped, she was tested, she went through really horrible things that I didn't know until this year. But what I did know about my great aunt Annie was that after the war was over, my grandmother found my grandfather, who was Czech. He had made it to Mexico through Chiapas. He couldn't make it to the US because a Jewish quota had been filled. They met, they married, and a couple years later, my grandmother found out that her sister was alive, and through the Red Cross, she brought her to Mexico. It took for her like a year to heal, and when she healed, she went on to open the very first Austrian bakery in Mexico.
That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary.
Do you want to hear a crazy thing? Well, that's
Of
crazy
course.
already, but... So I didn't know all these details, right? I didn't know that my grandmother, her name was Lotte Gross, and I didn't know that they were the only Jews in that city. You'll see a photo of her in a little. And I didn't know all these story. They were phenomenal cooks. They were phenomenal cooks. And so I go to Mexico in December, and some of my cousins are applying for Austrian citizenship because,
Yeah.
everybody's now applying.
Everybody's just in case now.
Just in case now.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so some of my cousins are applying for Austrian citizenship. And my kids, I have 3 boys who are American, Mexican, they cry with the American anthem, but they feel very Mexican too. And they find out that their cousins are Austrian, so they're like, Ma, we're American, we're Mexican, can we apply for the Austrian? And so I'm like, why? And so they said, let's just find out. And I was curious because my cousins were telling me all these stories, and I started connecting, because you feel, if your grandparents had to flee somewhere because they weren't treated right, like, why would you want to go back, right? So it's like that double feeling, double emotion. And so I called the Austrian embassy in Washington, D.C., and I leave a voicemail, and I say, hey, this is Pati Jinich, I'm a Mexican, but I think I'm also Austrian. So I wanted to see if I could apply for citizenship. Not for me, but my kids are thinking like they want to apply to citizenship. I get a call back the next day, and this lovely, lovely woman says, hey, I got a message from Pati Jinich. I'm like, yeah, that's me. And she said, you say you're Austrian? And I say, well, I think so. And she said, you're the Pati that makes tacos. And I said, yeah. And so she says, I watch your show every Saturday. And I'm like, thank you. And she says, you're Austrian? And I said, I think so. And she said, okay, so if you're Austrian, will you come to Austria and make some Austrian food? And I said, well, listen, you get me that Austrian citizenship, I'll be making apple strudel in no time. But so it's just so interesting because we tend to think, or society, or the way culture dictates things, you tend to think that you are more if you're more fully one thing and not many things at the same time. I don't know who but it's the perception is that you are less if you're many things. You are not purely one thing.
And I've always found that I really believe that every house, every home is its own culture. Because even in very tight communities where people share so much, maybe parentage or religion, the women will fight to the death about what you put in a dish, or no, that she can't be from the same Gubernia. She's from, Jenevelt over there if she makes it that way. And certainly, in my Italian voyage, you see this constantly where people fight about putting an onion in something or not. And as a child, I'm an only child of a single parent, and I was a latchkey kid, and so, all through elementary school, every single day, I was at somebody's house after school, which turned me into a voyeur very, very young. But it was amazing for me because every house smelled different. Every house had different food cultures. They had different meal times. They ate different things. That to me is the beauty of humanness, right? Is this multiplicity that we can hold within ourselves, many things, and still be whole, right?
What she said. That is so beautiful.
Are there slides that we're missing? Should we be giving somebody a cue to start to?
Yes. And I can tell you some of who is who. And I really wish that I knew all or some of these stories that I'm finding out today. When I was growing up, I remember so people used to ask me when I switched careers, I don't know if you know, but I wanted to be an academic. I was a political analyst. I switched careers. I went into cooking. And when I went into cooking, it was actually the best thing that could ever happen to me because through food, it's like so friendly to eat your way to finding your identity.
Absolutely.
And to, living in the US, I was so hungry for my home country, and it was my way to go back to Mexico and to eat Mexico, because I was really missing Mexico. But it was also my way of growing roots in the US. And I kept calling my dad and say, people are asking me about my Mexican Jewish story. And my grandfather, who I adored, you'll see a photo of him soon, he was Polish. He used to eat white onion. Oh, okay. His name was Isaac, and my grandmother was Esther, and they were my Polish grandparents. And don't I look like him? He was an angel. I mean, he's like my boys. They have really mushy hearts. He was just like good, and he used to eat white onion as if it were an apple. And he grew up eating, he would tell me the stories of what he grew up eating, and he would say that when he grew up, what they ate were 3 things: herring, white onion, and potato. And the herring, so it turns out that they lived in this little shtetl that was in between 2 towns. And the way that his parents were able to make more money other than farming for those onions and the potatoes were when passers-by would need a meal, they would cook for them herring one way or another. So he grew up eating herring fried, breaded, pickled, salted, in soups. That's all he ate. Friday night it was herring, and the other days it was potatoes and onions. So, and vodka sometimes when there were.
So did your grandmother have a Mexican herring recipe?
So no. So there was never herring in their homes. But so my grandmother also came from a very humble background in Poland, and in their house was very Ashkenazi, ¿cómo se dice burdo? Very unsophisticated. It was the white gefilte fish cold, or the gefilte fish a la veracruzana, which was with tomatoes and olives and capers and just chunky with pickled chiles. She had a big jar of schmaltz in her fridge. There were always grívenes, and she would make boiled chicken. And then you ate it with one kind of cimes or potato.
No salsa with the boiled chicken.
No, just boiled chicken. And she did bake really well. She made, the chocolate babkas and all of that. But my grandfather used, whenever there was fish, for example, he would eat the entire fish. I mean, the head, the eyes, the everything, because he was used to that, And it would always shock me and my cousins. We were 10 girls, much to his disgrace, because there was no one to continue his last name. But he really loved the flavors of Mexico. Think about all these Ashkenazi Jews that came from the cold, poor farmlands of Russia and the Ukraine and Poland and,
The fruit must have blown their minds.
Tomatoes and chocolate, and so Mexican cuisine did so much for this Ashkenazi food. It really embellished, warmed, seasoned. It was really incredible. On the other hand, on my mother's side, you have the Austrian, talk about sophisticated cooking and baking, and my grandfather, who was Czech. And they came from a very well-to-do background. But of course, they came to Mexico with nothing. My grandmother started sewing hats. But she spoke German and French and English. And when she got to Mexico, she learned Spanish. And then she started from nothing, and she became a businesswoman, she herself. And she took her family, and she became a very successful woman. And my grandfather was just very good looking. And she in her house, the food was very sophisticated. It was, and then she brought my great aunt, Annie, who made the apple strudels and the linzers and the of the sacher tortes and all the cookies, and it was like really incredible. But they wove in the Mexican spices and flavors. But so then my mom grew up with that. My father grew up with boiled chicken. And when they met and got married, they just couldn't understand each other. Like the families didn't like each other. And my mom tells me the story that her mother told her when she met my dad, "You're marrying a man that doesn't know how to eat an artichoke." They eventually divorced. They eventually divorced. But it was really fun when I was growing up, I have to say.
So before we go to Q&A, we should probably talk a little bit about Passover and what people might be tasting later.
Yes.
Is there another slide?
Yes, there were a few. We'll see while they come. Oh, okay. So this was, you can see, okay. So see how handsome he was? He was that's my mom. So on that corner was my father. And that's my mom. And then the man in the middle was my Czech grandfather, Francisco Františke Roth. That's my grandmother who came on that boat and used to sew hats. And that's their family. And that was when they, they built from the ground up and they established themselves in Mexico. So this was my mother's family. I'm sure there's other slides that I sent. There's some beautiful slides of my father that's what I was looking for. That's my dad when he was little. You can see him in his charro outfit.
Oh, my goodness.
Which they used to, he looks like Juju. Doesn't he look like my youngest one? The ears and the nose. And they used to dress him like charro, like for everything. And my dad said that it was actually embarrassing because my bubbe used to dress him like a charro when he was 15 years old, because they were so grateful to Mexico. And then that's when he had his bar mitzvah in Mexico as well. I know there's more photos somewhere there. Okay, so that's my mom with my oldest sisters. And on the right is my grandmother with my mom. And my family always just felt a deep gratitude to Mexico, and they felt like they belonged, and they did everything they could to give back to the country that had welcomed them. And I always, there's like a collage of my family. Oh, look, that was in one of my sister's weddings. That's my grandfather. You can see what an angel he was with a kippah. That's my Polish grandfather. He's very sweet. And then you can see there, that was my other handsome grandfather, who was like very elegant and a little more cold, but he was a very good man too. And that's my grandmother and my mom, and those are my sisters. And all my family's in Mexico. I'm the only one who is now in the US. That's my Austrian grandmother. So it turns out that Wolfsburg, this city in Austria, feels very bad now. And so now they're giving you immediate citizenship if you can prove that your family was persecuted. And because all my cousins flooded the Austrian embassy in Mexico, they're now naming a street in Wolfsburg after my grandmother. So hopefully I'll be there to see that street.
That's just extraordinary.
Isn't it crazy?
It is crazy. That's just extraordinary.
You want to hear a crazier thing?
There's
Quickly?
always crazier things, but that's pretty crazy.
Let me tell you a crazier thing. My Polish grandfather and my Polish grandmother had to leave Poland because, especially my grandfather, they had burnt down their shtetl 3 times before they decided to leave. So, fled Poland, Well, now, it turns out that Pati's Mexican Table airs in Poland. So I just got a note from somebody there's a Mexican ambassador in Poland who's connecting me to see if I want to come to a Mexican food festival in Poland, because they're airing Pati's Mexican Table in Poland. And I'm like, what would my grandfather think? He had to flee that country. He got to Mexico. 2 generations later, this Mexican, Polish Mexican has a TV cooking show in Poland, and I get emails in Polish.
It's crazy. I love that so much. Really crazy. I'm getting hungry. You have to talk to us about food.
Okay, so this is what you're gonna eat. Because my family is Jewish Ashkenazi, but the Mexican Jewish community is, it's not only Mexican Jewish Ashkenazi. It's very complicated, because there's Jews from Syria, there's Jews from Lebanon, there's Jews from Turkey, and even the Jews from Syria have two communities in Mexico, the Shamis and the Halevis. And they have separate synagogues and separate schools, and the food is exquisite, because I think like Ashkenazi food really got helped, with Mexican ingredients and seasonings. But think about, Middle Eastern food. It's already so rich and exquisite, and they have the dried fruits and the nuts and the seeds. So I was gonna say, you guys are gonna hopefully eat my bubbe's recipe for gefilte fish veracruzana, which is the gefilte fish, which is seasoned in a tomato broth with capers and olives and pepperoncini chilies. You're also going to taste my Austrian grandmother's recipe for matzo ball soup, which I put my hand in and added sesame oil, toasted sesame oil
Yum.
to the matzo balls, because she used to make her matzo balls with nutmeg and parsley. And I found that if I
make mine with nutmeg, and my mother used to tell me that I was some bizarre heretic for putting nutmeg in the matzo balls.
And she used to put nutmeg because she said it was much more subtle than black pepper. And when you think about it, nutmeg is like nutty and toasty, like the matzo meal, so it goes really well. When you add toasted sesame oil, it makes it even more nutty and toasty, as if like a toasted bread, kind of a toasty flavor. I find it to be really delicious. And then the other thing you're gonna eat from the Middle Eastern Jewish community is this thing where they marinate lamb meat. So it's ground lamb meat. Listen to this. It's marinated in tamarind syrup,
Oh, yum.
ancho chile paste, tomatoes, onions, jalapenos, like lots of spices. But what I can't resist is the combination of tamarind syrup and ancho chile with everything else. And then this ground mixture tops pita bread. It's like an open pizza kind of a thing. You put it in the oven, you dress it with tahini sauce, and you add guacamole, or like a slice of avocado. It's ridiculous.
That sounds so delicious. It sounds like kind of a chamoy-ish meat.
Yes.
Chamoy is like I'm obsessed with chamoy.
Well, this is like a chamoy-ish meat. It's exactly that.
I think
Do
we still have time to do Q&A?
Yeah, we have time for questions. And I also wanted to share with the group that your fabulous recipes are also in your beautifully designed packets. So yet another gift of love. So yes, go for it. Who has a question?
I don't want to forget about you, so let's jump to some questions.
Yes, of course. Does anybody have a question?
No tengan pena.
Do you want to go around with the microphone? Yeah. Okay, so you pick somebody. Who has a question?
If you have a question, raise your hand.
Ya va.
And well, I want to ask you
We
about
have
your
someone here.
Brazilian family.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Edgardo Gascon. I was born in Mexico City also, and I live here. And well, I have a question for you first, but I would like to tell a secret to all of you guys. My mom, that she thinks that she's a good cook. Thank God she's not here. She's not. But she has a secret on a recipe, on a Jewish recipe, with the matzo balls. She puts mozzarella cheese on the matzo balls, and they taste delicious. So this is like a little secret for your TV show.
Wait, are the matzo balls filled with the mozzarella cheese inside, or are
Yeah,
they mixed?
you mixed the mozzarella cheese with the
With the
matzo
batter?
meal.
Wow.
So it's throughout. It isn't stuffed.
Yeah.
It's not stuffed.
But
I'm
now I
thinking
wanna
like
make
the
a stuffed
Italian
one.
balls, like the Italian, the Italian.
soup.
A little bit like
Yes.
arancini.
Yeah, like
Well-
arancini.
Well, but this is like matzah, you know.
Thank you
That's-
for sharing that.
That sounds
Well.
incredible.
You had a question, though, for Patty?
Yeah, and my
I
question,
guess it's the challenge. Now I have to make that soup.
have you ever incorporated, like in Mexico, we have an amazing food, the moles, all the spices, like in the Jewish food, like in your recipes that you said that
Yes.
it could be your signature dish?
I have been asked a lot, like, why don't you do a Mexican Jewish cookbook? And why don't you do, and here's the thing. In order to do a Mexican Jewish cookbook, I don't know if you'll agree, but I feel like you have to be kosher. And I am not kosher, because if you do a Mexican Jewish cookbook, you have to understand and know the kashrut laws, because it should be inclusive to those that are. So you start from everything that's kosher proof, and then you can give variations. Like, I would have to educate myself on that. But I find that there's so much in the Mexican Jewish tradition already. Every time I go back to Mexico and I visit with Mexican Jewish friends, there's more and more dishes being concocted. I mean, there's so many Mexican Jewish community cookbooks, from synagogues and schools and the different.
So you need to
Communities.
collect all those.
Exactly, there's
And
already
then-
so many.
And
Yeah.
then, but you need to do it.
Yeah.
I wholly support.
Yeah.
I wholly support the idea.
What do you think
Because
about
my
the-
mind, I'm always going. I mean, people must be making tamales with
Oh, yeah.
with schmaltz.
We should.
I'm sure there must be people doing that, right?
I think, you know what? I think that they make them with vegetable shortening or oil. But you know what? What you're saying is pretty brilliant.
I mean, that would be so delicious.
That would be, and then you stuff them with grivenes.
And it's very, very light, very light. Okay, another
That's the
question.
flavor, yeah, because vegetable shortening is not
pregunta.
that tasty.
Raise your hand.
Ya va, ya va.
Hola, Pati.
Hola, Lidia.
I have the same question I had a long time ago. What about doing a book in Spanish?
So that is something that I hope we could do, but my publisher keeps on saying that there needs to be a market for that.
But there is a market
In-
in Mexico.
I know, and they've tried. It's not like they haven't tried. So I don't know if there needs to be a bigger demand. I mean, because there's Mexican cookbooks in Mexico, I've tried. I promise I will push. I've pushed with my last cookbooks, but
They've never been published in Spanish?
it's not published in Spanish.
That's very bizarre.
Isn't that bizarre?
I know. I'm gonna push. I'm gonna try.
People need to start writing letters to her publishers.
Yeah, I know.
Ya va, ya va, ya va.
Okay, another question.
And I know, yeah.
Quick question.
Hi.
Hi. So, what is going to be your Passover menu?
What is going to be my Passover menu? Pretty much what you're having now. So I always do, if I'm not doing a matzo ball soup like this one, I do it with the steamed mushrooms and jalapenos and cilantro. I always do the gefilte fish Veracruz style. And I will do one kind of chicken or another, and all of the recipes are on my website. I have the tamarind and apricot and chipotle, or I'll do the piloncillo, tomatillo, and chipotle. So some kind of sweet and sour and spicy. I love doing that for Passover. And then, of course, a flourless chocolate cake, which I love so much.
So
Javi.
are we over
Okay.
here?
On my way, we still have time.
This gentleman here,
Ya va.
she's coming, she's coming.
Meanwhile, what are you having for Passover?
It depends on whose house I go to.
We're all going to Patty's house. Patty, are you self-taught when you changed occupations, or did you go to some kind of cooking school, or
Yeah.
How did that happen?
So I was a terrible, awful, horrible, dreadful cook when I got married. I've always been a fabulous eater, but I wasn't a good cook at all. And my 3 older sisters all went into cooking very early on. So my oldest sister has a restaurant now in Mexico City called Nido, which you all have to go to, which is phenomenal. And she used to give cooking classes since she was in high school. You know, she just... Then my next sister, Lisa, was a trained pastry chef, and she's had restaurants in Mexico and in Miami. My next sister is a vegan, also into fashion and lifestyle, who's very much into healthy eating. I was a political scientist, you know, as a political analyst. So when I moved to the US, I started just learning to cook Mexican food, making phone calls to my family, connecting with other Mexicans. But when I decided to switch careers, I enrolled in culinary school in Gaithersburg, Maryland. It was called l'Académie de Cuisine. And I did that, but to be honest, I've learned a lot more through my travels in Mexico, because cooking school typically, I don't know if it's changed, focuses on European techniques. So there was nothing of like our Latin ingredients in our... It did give me a solid foundation, but when you think about Mexican and Latin cooking, I've learned from very generous, mostly home cooks who I've been able to cook with.
Okay, we're in the neighborhood. We're in the neighborhood.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I am such a huge fan of yours, mostly from PBS. I'm absolutely addicted to your shows, and I only watch cooking shows on PBS because that's the only place to really learn how to cook whatever the cuisine is. It's not some sort of physical marathon event or some crazy twisted recipe concoction. But your show has really gotten me through some hard times personally, because I find it a great escape when you have pressure to watch the shows. But what I'm going to ask you is, I'm always amazed at how composed you are and joyful, and your show just comes across so beautifully. I always tell my son, who's 21, he even watches it with me, that you do it so well, you make it look so easy. And I know it's not, but how, I mean, I love the way you combine the travel with the talking about food. It's kind of like Gourmet Magazine, but on television, where it's not just the food. You learn, you travel, you cook, and you do it all in like 27 minutes. I don't understand, but I would like to know how you do that.
You watch it in 25 minutes, but...
No, I know, but you know, I don't know, especially the cooking part, it looks like it's just water off a duck's back. You just do it so gracefully and beautifully and joyfully, and I love the way you also include your family. But I'd like to know how you got into that sort of rhythm. You know, how did it start out?
So I have to say, you guys, Evan and I are sending you some tequila.
Yeah, right now we're giving you a little treat.
Yes, it was going to be a surprise, so surprise!
It is a surprise.
Sorry, guys.
Just make sure there's some for us as well.
Okay, yeah. No, thankfully the elixirs of the gods, there's more of that. Okay, there was somebody here.
But I was going to say, as to what you're saying, and I know that Evan does the same with her cookbooks, and whenever, I mean, how many times do you test a recipe before you share it with the world?
A lot. I mean, it's so rare that you hit it one time, and then, you know, often you work with friends, somebody whose palate you trust, and you say, make this, because it has to be able to be done. But I want to talk on Patty's behalf about what you said about the way she navigates meeting people and travel and food. And I would say that once you have a foundation of knowledge in a culinary region, like Patty does in Mexico, then when you meet new people, you're free to just fly. And I'm sure that she, like for me, and for many of us who do this kind of work, there's nothing more pleasurable than leaving your daily life and meeting someone who is passionate, even if it's about a humble single dish that their town is known for. I mean, this is what your most recent book is all about, right? And you get to hear their story. Like you heard Patty's story, she gets to hear somebody else's story. And I just think that you take to it like duck to water, right?
Yeah, and I was going to say that my relationship with the show and with, I'm so grateful to the people who watch the show, because they've become like an extended family to me. I mean, I get emails that I read every single one of them and I take the feedback, and I feel like my relationship with the people who watch the show and the people who are in the show has deeply evolved. In the first seasons of Patty's Mexican Table, I went to the Mexico I knew. I wanted to share the Mexico that I knew and that I thought people didn't understand and didn't know. And I wanted to open that door, and it was like, come with me, to Mexico City. Come with me, this is Puebla. Come with me, this is Mexico. But then, and I used to translate a lot when I went to Mexico, because the team I worked with, nobody understood Spanish, so I had to translate to them. So say if I was talking to you, you speak Spanish like me, we could be talking in Spanish and it's amazing, but nobody understood, so they would say, ask in Spanish, but then repeat the question in English. And so people would get like, why is she asking me now in English if I just explained in Spanish? I would translate to camera, so it didn't flow as much. As the years went on, thankfully, the American palate and openness, super open and changed. So now the American audience is really open to watch content that is in Spanish but subtitled. So if you notice in the latest seasons, I go to Mexico and I'm talking to people in Spanish. So there's no interruption of our conversation, and there's a really genuine connection, and I'm meeting and we're sharing and it's amazing. You get the subtitles, and then when I go to my kitchen, I'm talking in English with my accent, which, sorry, doesn't get better. But then you get the recipes and everything, and it's really changed, because not only has that changed, where in Mexico I'm connecting in Spanish and you're all with me, but I'm also taking you now to places I've never been to. And that is really exciting to me, because now you're coming with me to explore as I humbly explore the Mexico I don't know. The older I get and the more I go to Mexico, the more I realize the little I know, my home country, and the more I'm in the US, I realize the little I know about the US. And so it's become this journey where I'm just so hungry to learn more of the time, because Mexico is such an incredibly big, diverse, rich, wonderful place that even Mexicans from one region and another don't know. Give you an example. I come from Mexico City. In Mexico City, most people think that flour tortillas are for sincronizadas. You have them in the fridge. We think that flour tortillas are for Americans to make wraps. And then I go to Sonora, and then I go to Sinaloa, and then I go to Chihuahua, and I realize that flour tortillas, first of all, have been made there for 500 years since the Spanish got there, that any flour tortilla from any tortilleria in those places will give a corn tortilla a run for its money. Where I used to say, oh no, corn tortilla is much better. Well, no. Flour tortillas made with beef, lard, and cracklings. I mean, just insane. Or the gigantic flour tortillas, and they're Mexican. And there's like entire states that eat flour tortillas more than corn tortillas, and Mexicans in the South and Yucatan, we don't know our people, we don't know our country. But the same thing happens in the US. As a Mexican, I used to think about the US as, oh, there's barbecue, there's pizza, there's hamburgers, which I love. But now I'm like, oh, there's all these regional barbecues, there's all these. So it's just very humbling, because through the world of food, you can eat your way as you learn about it and understand it. So what you're saying about the show is, I'm just learning, I'm just sharing what I'm learning, which is so nice to share with such kind audience, because the best thing that can happen to me is when I get an email or an Instagram or something that says, look, we made your Mexican mac and cheese, and we made this twist, and now we make it every week. And I'm like, thank you, because food is communal. It's not mine. I was very lucky to inherit it. What I want to do is pass it on, because it was here before me, and it'll be here when I'm gone. So the fact that we're sharing this food and it's enriching your life, it's yours. Make it however you want, and then you're gonna pass it on and you'll enrich someone's life. So that's my point of view.
Lovely. Okay.
Hi, my name is Karina, and I was wondering, what's your favorite dish, and what's the dish that you stay completely away from, outside of the sesos?
I don't know if Evan feels this the same way, but I eat everything and love everything. And because of, I guess, my family, I told you my grandfather used to eat the eyes of fish. I love liver and sweetbreads and tongue, and I eat everything. So the one thing I haven't been able to like are cow brains. Like in Mexico, there's a lot of tacos de sesos, and I've tried, and I just can't. That's the one thing I just can't. Yeah. And what I love, people always ask you what's your favorite dish, and I always say the one thing that I could eat every day, and I could eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is pechuga de pollo empanizada con puré de papa. And I know it sounds very basic, but chicken milanesa with mashed potatoes and chipotle adobo on the side, I'm a queen.
See, when people ask me that question, I say masa. Masa in any form is my desert island food. It's my last meal food.
Like tamal.
Anything made with masa. Sopes, anything.
Antojitos.
Antojitos. But also just even when you're making a soup and you fold a little bit of masa into the broth.
Velvety.
Velvety. Or pozole, and you still get that taste from the...
So I have in my new cookbook and also on my website, I have a soup that's called a belly button soup.
Ooh.
It doesn't have any belly buttons. I thought it had belly buttons. But it's called belly button soup or sopa de ombligo because there's masa dumplings that are made con masas. If you were making a tamal, which now I'm thinking it would be really amazing with chicken schmaltz, but you make the dumplings with any kind of fat, lard or schmaltz. And then I also add a little bit of queso fresco and some fresh herbs. You make the little dumplings and you make a dent. So that's why they're called
yummy.
belly buttons. But those cook in a creamy pinto bean cream of soup that's enriched with pureed roasted tomatoes.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
so delicious, and as the dumplings cook, they let out that velvety texture.
Oh, I'm going to have that. And before we go to the last question, I just want to give a shout out. KCRW every year does a tortilla contest, and it's run, our overlord for the tortilla contest is Gustavo Arellano, and it's like a bracket. So we start out with 64 tortillas, 32 corn, 32 flour, and we've been doing it now for 4 years. We did it during the pandemic even, and so when it comes around again, I encourage you to come if we have an actual event, or sign up if it's a Zoom, because it's so much fun, and you learn so much about something that you think is monolithic, but then you find out has all these millions of variations. Okay, that's my thing. Last question.
Last question, just for this part of the program, and I'm going to go because I know she was the first one to arrive.
I love you, Patty. I've been watching you since season 1, episode 1.
No, season 1 and season 2 are horrible, Evan.
No, they're awesome.
They're
I'd love
so
to watch,
bad.
No, I loved. You know what? I love to watch you evolve too, and it's such a beautiful show. So when is season 11 coming, por favor?
So
¿Cuándo?
actually, we're going to film in 2 weeks.
Oh, awesome.
I'm going to Nuevo León,
Oh,
which I've never been to. So this is what I'm telling you. Like for the new seasons, I'm like, I want to go to places I haven't been to, and there's so many. So we're starting the new decade of Patty's Mexican Table, and I'm hoping that every season will be in a place that I haven't been. I haven't been to Nuevo León. I haven't been to Coahuila, I haven't been to Nayarit, I haven't been to Hidalgo, I haven't been to Tlaxcala. It's like,
And what about La Frontera? You're
Oh,
going
that
to
was
do
such a
us,
great
right? For
show.
season
Oh my
2.
God, La Frontera was great.
yeah,
Oh.
okay, so we just
Yeah.
got renewed for a second season of La Frontera with the support of PBS and CPB. And some generous donors, please. We need to come up with half of the budget. You know how PBS
Yes, I
goes,
do.
NPR goes. But so we just got renewed for the second season, and the great news for the second season of La Frontera, which I love the borderland so much.
It's amazing.
You know why? Because it's like, I'm a Mexican, I'm a Jew, now I'm American, but maybe I want to be an Austrian. You know where you fit? At the borderlands. That's where you, because there, like at the border, people just have the freedom to be. I mean, they have it really hard, and they have to survive every day against the odds, you know, all the, but identities have such a different meaning, you know, how food and culture is lived. It's like a different universe opens there that we
So
don't understand
rich.
with our labels, you know. There is like labels. You can be in the same table with someone who just crossed, whose brother is the police, who's, you know, it's just like the other one is a poet, the other one grows produce, the other one sells, but it's just like labels have a different meaning and we're just human there. But what I was gonna say is La Frontera is going to be not 2 episodes, but 3. So we're doing, the first episode was Texas, from El Paso to Brownsville. It was 2 hours, because Texas is so gigantic, you guys. But the second season will be 3 hours, and it will be Nuevo Mexico, Arizona, and California. So I'm coming to you. So if you have any thoughts or ideas, please email. The stories are so different. Even Texas, you know, when thinking Tex-Mex food, every place I went to the Rio Grande Valley, and I would talk about the food from San Antonio, and they were like, that Tex-Mex food is not Rio Grande Tex-Mex food.
I
So
envy you all of
fascinating.
that. I want to thank all of you for being so patient and for enjoying Patty. I mean, what a pleasure this has been.